What would you do if life handed you not one, not two, but 10 babies at once? Most people would call it impossible. Some would call it a miracle. Others would call it a curse. But for one woman, it was her reality. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't rich. She came from an ordinary background, a quiet life filled with simple dreams. Yet, in a single moment, her world changed forever. 10 tiny lives placed in her arms, 10 cries filling the air, 10 futures depending on her alone. At first, people thought the real story was the birth itself. Doctors were shocked. The world whispered in amazement. But what she chose to do after that moment is what left everyone speechless. This is not just a story about motherhood. It is a story about courage, sacrifice, and choices that define a lifetime. It is about how one woman transformed the impossible into something unforgettable. And today, you will learn every detail. The struggles, the pain, the sleepless nights, but also the hope, the strength, and the shocking decision that changed everything. Stay with us until the very end, because the truth of what happened will not only surprise you, it will inspire you. Welcome to Pure African Tales, where real stories meet powerful lessons. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe and join us, because the story you are about to hear is one you will never forget. Before the world knew her name, before the miracle made headlines, she lived a life like many others. Her days began early, sometimes before sunrise, with the sound of neighbors fetching water and children running to school. She worked quietly, earning just enough to get by. Money was always a struggle. Rent was late more times than she could count. Meals were simple, often more about filling the stomach than enjoying taste. Yet, she carried herself with dignity, never letting her hardships show to the outside world. Her family had expectations, like most families do. They wanted her to settle down quickly, to marry, to raise children. Some whispered that she was taking too long, others judged her choices. But deep inside, she held her own dream: to become a mother, not just for tradition, not just for duty, but because she longed to pour love into another life. The community around her knew her as gentle, hardworking, and quiet. She would help neighbors with their chores, she would take care of younger cousins, and she was always present during family gatherings. People often said she had the heart of a mother, long before she had children of her own. But life was not kind to her. Behind her smile were challenges that only she understood. There were nights she went to bed hungry. There were times when jobs slipped through her hands, not because she lacked the skill, but because opportunity was scarce. And yet, even with these struggles, she kept faith in her dream. She often prayed for the day she would hold her own child. She imagined lullabies, small footsteps running across her floor, and the warmth of a family built by love. Her relatives sometimes teased her for dreaming too much. Others reminded her of the cost of raising even one child. Still, she carried that dream silently in her heart, refusing to let the weight of poverty take it away from her. Looking back, the signs were always there. She had already faced storms. She had already endured battles with survival. Life had been testing her strength long before the moment that would shock the world. Her life changed with one visit to the clinic. She had gone in expecting ordinary news, perhaps confirmation of one child, maybe two. But what the doctor heard on the monitor stunned even him. One heartbeat, then another, and another. He adjusted the machine, thinking it must be an error. Yet the sound kept coming. More beats, more lives. He sat back, speechless, before finally telling her the truth. She was carrying not one baby, not two, not three, but 10. The room fell silent. She stared at the doctor, unable to believe what she had just heard. The words sounded unreal, like something out of a dream or a story told to frighten people. 10 tiny lives growing inside her. News spread quickly, as it always does. In the town, whispers filled the air. Some people called it a miracle, others a curse. Neighbors talked about how she would never survive it, how no one could possibly raise 10 children at once. A few even doubted if it was true, wondering if doctors had made a mistake. Inside her, emotions clashed. At times, her heart swelled with excitement. She imagined 10 pairs of eyes looking up at her, 10 small voices calling her mother. Other times, fear took over. How could she feed them? How could she clothe them? How could she even survive giving birth to so many at once? Nights became heavy with questions. She lay awake, one hand resting on her stomach, whispering silent prayers. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she smiled. Too was torn, but she never gave up. Some urged her to think of herself, to consider giving some of the babies away after birth. Others tried to discourage her, saying she would never manage. But she remained silent through their arguments, her eyes filled with quiet determination. She had already made a decision. No matter how hard it became, no matter what the world said, she would protect every single child. Each heartbeat was a promise, and she would not break it. Her body grew heavy quickly, her steps slower with each passing day. People watched her with curiosity, some with pity, others with awe. Every time she entered the clinic for a checkup, nurses whispered, and doctors exchanged looks of worry. But for her, every sound of those heartbeats was proof that life was still holding on. Fear never left her, but neither did courage. And as her due date came closer, she held on to one vow. If life had chosen her for this miracle, she would carry it through, no matter the cost. The day arrived sooner than anyone expected. Her body, already stretched beyond what seemed humanly possible, could no longer carry the weight of 10 lives. Doctors rushed her into the delivery room, their faces tense with worry. They knew this would not be an ordinary birth. The room filled with the hum of machines, the shuffle of nurses, and the steady instructions of surgeons preparing for a risky delivery. Outside, her family waited nervously, their hearts torn between hope and fear. Hours passed slowly. The pain was unimaginable, and the risk hung heavy in the air. Every second felt like a battle between life and death. And then, finally, the sound everyone had been waiting for. The first cry, then another, and another. Soon, the room was filled with the sharp, piercing cries of newborn life. One by one, 10 babies came into the world, tiny, fragile, yet strong enough to announce their presence with voices that echoed through the hospital walls. Doctors stood in awe. Some had delivered hundreds of children in their lifetime, but none had ever witnessed a moment like this. Nurses exchanged glances of disbelief as they carefully wrapped each child in cloths, placing them side by side. In the waiting area, word spread like fire. Relatives gasped. Some wept openly, unable to believe it was real. Neighbors who had doubted her now whispered with astonishment. The impossible had happened before their eyes. When the moment came for her to see them, she could hardly lift her head. Exhaustion covered her face, but her eyes widened as the nurses brought the babies closer. 10 small faces, 10 pairs of tiny hands reaching out without knowing the struggles of the world they had entered. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered a prayer of gratitude. Despite the fear, despite the pain, despite the voices that told her it could never be done, here they were, alive, breathing, crying, her children. For a moment, she forgot the weight of poverty, the doubts of her community, and the exhaustion in her body. All she felt was an overwhelming flood of love and responsibility. 10 souls had chosen her, and in that instant, she knew her life would never be the same again. The hospital halls buzzed with noise, reporters began to gather, and people from far away started to call it a miracle. But for her, the miracle was not in the headlines or the astonishment of strangers. It was in the warmth of those cries. It was in the sight of her babies lined up before her. It was in the simple, silent truth. They were hers. The miracle of 10 births quickly turned into a storm of reality. The cries that once filled her heart with joy soon echoed endlessly through the small rooms of her home. 10 mouths to feed, 10 tiny hands reaching out, 10 lives depending on her every breath. Each day was a cycle of sleepless nights and endless tasks. The moment one baby closed its eyes, another awoke crying for milk. Her body, already drained from the birth, could not keep up with their hunger. She stretched what little food she had, watering down milk, skipping meals herself just so the children could have more. Her eyes grew darker with fatigue. Her hands trembled with weakness, yet she never stopped moving. Hour after hour, she carried them, rocked them, soothed them, until her body nearly collapsed. And then came the money. Hospital bills piled up. Diapers, medicine, clothing. Everything cost more than she could imagine. Each day felt like a mountain she had no strength to climb. Relatives who once celebrated the miracle now looked at her with pity. Some helped with small donations, but many shook their heads saying, "How will she ever manage?" The community was divided. Some called her blessed. They admired her strength, saying she had been chosen for something extraordinary. Others judged her harshly, whispering that she had brought too much upon herself, that she would never raise them well. Every trip to the market was filled with stares and murmurs. She felt them all, even when she kept her head down. There were nights when she sat on the floor, holding 2 babies in her arms while the others cried around her. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered promises to each child, that she would never abandon them, that she would fight no matter what it took. Her body broke, but her spirit refused to. Every tear was matched with determination. Every sleepless night became a test of love. And though she feared tomorrow, she faced each day with the same vow she made when she first heard those heartbeats. She would protect them all. The world saw only the miracle. She lived the struggle. Most people in her place would have broken down. Some would have given up, leaving their children in the care of others. But she refused to surrender. The weight was heavy, yes, but she began to think differently. If she couldn't carry it alone, then she would find a way to build support around her. She started by reaching out, first to hospitals, where doctors had once doubted her survival. She spoke to them with calm determination, explaining her situation, asking for whatever little help they could provide. A few were moved, offering free checkups, milk substitutes, and medical guidance. It wasn't enough, but it was a beginning. Then she knocked on the doors of charities. She stood in long lines, filled out endless forms, and told her story again and again. Some people turned her away with polite excuses. Others looked at her with disbelief, thinking no one could be the mother of 10. But in the crowd of rejection, there were also hearts that listened. Small donations arrived. Food packages came. Slowly, support began to build. Her neighbors, too, started to notice her resilience. They saw her walking daily, carrying 2 babies while guiding the others. They saw her refusing to beg, instead asking only for work, for opportunities, for anything that could help her children survive. The same community that once gossiped began to soften. A bag of rice here, a blanket there. Each small act made survival possible. But she did not stop there. She began to use her story not just for survival, but for awareness. She spoke openly about the challenges of motherhood, about how women were often left to struggle alone. Her words reached beyond her neighborhood. Newspapers began to write about her. People from other towns wanted to meet her. What began as whispers of pity turned into voices of admiration. Mothers who once hid their struggles now saw her as a symbol of courage. Women came to her, sharing their own burdens, seeking advice. She listened, she comforted, she inspired. Without planning it, she became more than a mother to 10. She became a voice for many. Her life was still filled with sleepless nights and endless challenges. But something had shifted. The world that once judged her now began to respect her. And in her eyes, a new strength was growing. She was not just surviving anymore. She was leading. Change did not come all at once. It came slowly, like drops of water filling an empty jar. One day, a stranger brought food. Another day, a local shopkeeper offered milk. Then, an organization stepped in with supplies for the children. Piece by piece, her world began to shift. Donations arrived, not enough to make her rich, but enough to ease the constant fear of hunger. Clothes for the babies, medicine for their fevers, blankets for the cold nights. The weight on her shoulders grew lighter, though never fully gone. But even that small relief gave her space to breathe. With time, she realized that her story could be more than survival. She started gathering other mothers, women who were struggling in silence. They met in small groups, sharing their pain, their fears, their hopes. From those simple gatherings grew the seed of something larger, a small project, a foundation built not on wealth, but on shared strength. No mother should feel alone. She spoke with honesty, telling the world that raising children was not just a private duty, but a community's responsibility. Her words carried weight because they came from experience. She had lived through what many feared, and she was still standing. Meanwhile, her children grew stronger. The thin cries of newborns slowly turned into laughter that filled the rooms. Their small bodies, once fragile, began to gain strength. Each milestone, first steps, first words, first smiles, was a reminder that her sacrifices were not in vain. For the first time since the birth, she felt her life shifting from burden to purpose. She was not simply a mother carrying an impossible load. She was a woman shaping a legacy. Her struggles became her power, and her story became her gift to the world. Looking back, she often says, "I thought 10 babies would break me. Instead, they built me. What once felt like a burden became her strength. What once felt impossible became her purpose." Her story is proof that family, love, and determination are stronger than fear. That no matter how heavy the challenge, the heart of a mother can carry more than the world expects. She began as one woman facing the impossible. She became a symbol of courage, of survival, of love that multiplies even in hardship. And as we leave her story, we are reminded that true wealth is not measured in money, but in the lives we lift, the love we give, and the strength we share. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel, Pure African Tales. Because here, we bring you stories that inspire, stories that move, and stories you will never forget.